Hello, fellow seekers. I was intending for this to be my first ever video podcast, but unfortunately, after 3 unsuccessful attempts at recording, I've come to the conclusion that I don't have the proper camera set up yet, and that I won't for some time. But, for the curious, here I am in low res. Thank you so much to everyone who responded to my 20,000 Q&A. I got so many great responses. Not all of them were questions. Most of them were congratulations on reaching 20,000, or people saying how grateful they were to find the channel, which delighted me no end. I am incredibly happy to have reached as many people as I appear to have, and the positive reaction I get from my audience is the main reason I keep going. So, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Some of the questions were science-related, which I won't be able to answer because I'm in the middle of doing about 4 different things right now, and I don't have time to do the research, but I may save that for another video. So for this video, I'm going to restrict my answers to the questions that were about me specifically, if that's okay. So let's get on with the questions. First question: how did you get involved with astronomy? I can't really say exactly when it happened. I've always been interested in science. I've always been interested in the natural world. I've always been interested in paleontology and ecology and natural history. Specifically astronomy, though, I don't think I was really connected to it until 1989, when I saw Neptune for the first time. That was really the moment that hit me. I was looking at something that no human being had ever seen before. People had seen Neptune before, obviously, but no one had ever seen that beautiful azure sea of methane clouds with that gorgeous deep blue rotating storm and that glittering wizard's eye. It was magical. And that's one of the reasons that I focus primarily on planetary discoveries, because it is in the planetary sciences, I think, rather than the star sciences, where the most world-altering discoveries are made, as the recent kerfuffle about Pluto has shown. Next question: have you read The Vital Question by Nick Lane? It is the study of the origins of life and complexity and touches on what a thorough understanding of them would mean for the prevalence of life and intelligence in the universe. No, but I scanned it, your suggestion, and it certainly looks like a book I should buy. I may even do a video about it, like I did for Rare Earth. Bro, can I, buy you a better microphone? Yeah, please. I'm always on the lookout for a way to improve my sound. It's been the albatross around my neck since I began this project, more than anything else. And I don't know the first thing about sound production, so please, if you think you know how to improve my sound, I would really appreciate some advice. Have you thought about cooperating with other content producers to get more exposure? Yes. In fact, I'm doing that right now. I'm doing a collaboration with 2 other YouTube content creators. I don't want to go into too much detail right now because they haven't announced it, so I figure I'll wait until they do. But yeah, I'm definitely interested in doing a collaboration. Assuming all medical, financial, etc. considerations were covered, would you live on Mars? No. Mars is for the pioneers, for the fit of body and the sharp of mind, and I am very much a product of civilization. If it wasn't for modern technology, I wouldn't even be alive. I belong in a chair on the internet, living several rungs up the ladder of survival. I would be absolutely useless on Mars. So, no. Does your research ever tempt you to go down a rabbit hole that isn't related to astronomy? Oh yeah. Although not so much these days. For just one example, a few years back my mom and I visited Tintagel Castle in Cornwall, which is supposedly where King Arthur was born. And while we were there, an archaeologist found a stone inscription covering a drainpipe that said Arthnu had this place built. It sent me in a year-long tailspin to try and figure out if King Arthur was real. I didn't. Congratulations. Thank you. I'd like to know if you have any pets and see pictures, video of said pets. I do. I have a cat, but I'll have to show you some old video of him because he's not here at the moment. As you can see, he's quite big. He's pretty old. He's 7. And I got him from a shelter. He only has 1 eye. And considering the fact that he spent most of his life as a stray, I think we get along pretty well. You've mentioned before you have limited mobility. What's up with that? Well, not so much up as down. A lot. I fall down a lot. I have cerebral palsy, and it's recently become quite a problem because, as you may have noticed, I've put on some weight in the last couple of years, and the last time I fell over, I broke my arm. So I've actually had to start using a cane for the first time in my life, and yeah, that took some getting used to. Have you ever encountered something that can't be explained with science? If so, how do you feel about it? I've certainly encountered things that I can't explain, but whether science can explain them, I don't know. The closest thing I've ever had to a paranormal experience occurred when I was 6 years old, living in San Francisco. I was lying in bed at night in one of those half awake, half sleep states of being. I happened to turn my head to my far wall, and I saw the most cliched ghost you could ever imagine. It was literally a half formed, translucent, white sheet, and it was flying around my room in a circle. And even at the time, I came from a very empirically minded household, so I decided to see if I could make it go away. I closed my eyes, I opened them again, and then I looked again, and it was still there. And it was at that point that I freaked out and ran. My parents were very upset that I woke them up, but not as upset as they were a couple weeks later, a couple months later, when I broke a glass jar crammed with those disgusting silver balls that taste vaguely like mint and vaguely like engine oil. And I, of course, had to go and clean up the mess, but I had to go down and get the broom, which was in the broom closet, which was in a really dark, dank alleyway that looked like it came out of The Exorcist. And as I was walking down the stairs, I saw out the back window the same figure walking up the stairs. There was no getting around it this time because I was wide awake. And of course, when I freaked out and started running, everyone thought I was trying to get out of doing the job. That triggered in me a lifelong obsession with ghosts. I read every book I could on ghosts. I was trying to find out everything I could on ghosts. And it only really ended in my 20s when I realized that however hard I looked, I wasn't going to get any answers. And that basically began my road toward skepticism. Not because I stopped entertaining the possibility in paranormal things, but because I would rather focus my life on topics about which I had some chance of learning the truth. When is the part 2 to the Time series coming? Yeah, that one. I was at a very low point when I made that. I was having a lot of trouble trying to come up with the latest episode of the Water series, which is still coming. And I called up a friend of mine and I asked her what I should do. And she said, why don't you just make a video based on stuff you already know? Okay, just pulled a book off my shelf and I said, I'll work from this. And thus, the timekeeping series was made. And I actually took all the notes for the whole series, and I intended to do it as a single 3-parter, but nobody watched it. I mean, I don't blame you for not watching it. You are under no obligation to like or watch my work. But it just wasn't very popular, and I thought, okay, I'll do something more topical. So I made a video about Beetlejuice, and people seem to like that. But I'm a man of my word, and I will finish the series, but I've decided to make it an annual tradition. So part 2 will come out next year, and part 3 the year after that. What's your favorite research tool? The British Library. I don't know where I'd be or what I'd do if I didn't have it. And when people ask me to move out of London, I say I can't. I need the British Library. It's closed right now, obviously, but if I could figure out a way to subsist on $10 sandwiches, I would live there. Have you traveled to do research for your videos or other work like Wikipedia? No. No, I mean, I live in London, navel of the world. I don't need to travel. People come to me. And one of the great things about living in Europe is that you have really good broadband, so I have access to pretty much the entire internet whenever I want it. Which of your projects are you most proud of? The Water series. I think it's my most, for lack of a better word, mature series. It's certainly my most informative series. A lot of my Fermi Paradox videos and my Flat Earth series were made very early on when I didn't really know what I was doing. I still don't really know what I'm doing, to be honest, but I knew even less of what I was doing. And so they don't come across as particularly good. I think I might redo them someday when I'm in a more comfortable position. When the audio quality of your videos changes for just one line, is that a line you recorded over, or is that a stylistic choice? No, no, it's a line I recorded over. If you hear my voice suddenly going like this, it means that there was a plane or a car or a motorcycle in the background or something. Or that I breathed on my microphone, which thankfully will never happen again because I have a pop guard now. You mentioned growing up in London, so I'm curious how you developed your mid-Atlantic accent. Yeah, this is easily the most frequently asked question I get. I understand it, makes sense. The problem is, I can't really answer it in too much detail. To give you the honest answer would require me dragging in other people who might not want their lives spread-eagled on YouTube. What I can tell you is that I was born in New York of an American mother and a British father, and I've spent about half my life in America and half my life in the UK. That statement, whilst being 100% correct, is also 100% false. But I'm afraid I can't go any further than that. Which scientist do you admire most and why? That's a tough one. The problem is that scientists aren't really noted for being admirable. Not that scientists aren't admirable, it's just that we don't tend to admire scientists. We tend to respect them because their job is to discover things, not to be good people. Nobody really cares if Isaac Newton saved kids from fires. So when looking for someone you respect, you have to respect the entire person, not just what they found out. And in that sense, I think probably William Herschel is my favorite scientist because aside from discovering a planet and possessing a true seeker's soul, he seems to have been a genuinely nice person, bringing in his sister when no one else would take her, and giving her the tools to become a great astronomer in her own right. He went down a blind alley for a long time, trying to measure the parallax of binary stars, but when other people finally convinced him that he was wrong, he admitted he was wrong, and moved on. Do you think there are aliens right now among us and no one knows? At least not officially. Here's the thing. How far are you willing to take that? If, for instance, I were to take a sample of people, say 1,000 people, and then we were to test each one of them for blood, DNA, and we found that there were no aliens among them, or 10,000 people or 1,000,000 people, there were no aliens among them, would you then have to say, well, the aliens are living in a higher dimension and they're moving around us like ghosts, we can't see them? After a while, when do these aliens become gods? And I don't believe in gods. So that's the point where I draw the line. Can you do an involved video on quantum mechanics or string theory? Quantum entanglement? Yeah. I don't know if I'd be able to make it any more interesting than a lot of other videos on the subject. I mean, the story is interesting. The double slit experiment is one of the most maddeningly simple experiments ever performed in the history of science. So it would be an interesting thing to talk about. I don't know whether I could do it any more justice than your average documentary, though. Where did you grow up and where do you live? I grew up in many places, too many to list quickly, but I live in London now. I know you've been doing Wikipedia work for a while and would like to know more how you got into that. I clicked edit. That's really all I did. I saw a topic that I felt needed working on. It was an article on the definition of planet, currently a featured article. I decided that I would make an article about it, and I did. And that's really all you need to do. Wikipedia isn't that scary, guys. I know it seems scary now, and it's certainly a lot scarier now than it was when I started, because when I started, it was basically the Wild West, and people could get away with a lot more than they could get away with now. But the fact is, I mean, the open source ethos is still there. Literally anyone can walk in off the street and just edit it. If you see something you think needs clarification, edit it. And if you're afraid to edit it, just go on the talk page and say, look, I have this issue. Can I fix it? And they'll tell you what you need to do. Usually, provide a citation. Come in armed with a few citations, and you can create any article you want. It's that simple, guys. It really, really is. What inspired you to start your videos, and how do you choose your topics? What's inspired me to start my videos was Wikipedia, actually, because I got sick and tired of seeing words that I'd written appear uncredited in newspaper articles. I figured that if I was going to pursue this, I would want to get some credit of my own, and YouTube seemed like the best way to go about that. How do you choose your topics? That's a difficult question. I think basically I choose the topics that I think I'd be able to do. As I said, I'm not a scientist, and my knowledge base is relatively limited, so I tend to focus on the things that I know about and then expand on those. You've been open about your struggles, and I would welcome more in that context if not too intrusive. Well, I can't really be any more honest about it than I was in my review of Melancholia, but yeah, I have clinical depression, and I have since I was a very small child. It's probably not reactive or based on anything in terms of having a disability or being autistic, which I am. It's probably just a part of my personality. I'm on antidepressants, and they work, and I treat my depression pretty much the same as I would treat any of my other conditions, just something I have to live with. I don't think it defines me or has an impact on my personality. It's just one of my issues. Where and what did you study? I have a master's degree in research from Queen Mary University of London. The funny thing is, Queen Mary actually has a really good astronomy department. I wish I'd known that when I was there. How long does it take you to gather all the information for a video, and how do you go about piecing together the interrelated history? It takes between 1 and 3 weeks to do the research, depending on how much research is required. As a rule, I don't like piecing together things. I prefer to read books, because that way someone else has already done the piecing together and I can just report what the books say. On the rare occasions like my last video, where I did have to do the piecing together, it can get quite complicated, because of course the British Library's closed, so I don't have access to books. Wow, check out this commie guy's Twitter. Please do, yeah. I don't think I'm a commie. I studied Russian history in high school, so I'm pretty up on what communism does to people. But since commie seems to be a term for anyone to the left of Joe Biden, yeah, I live in the UK, which is a country to the left of Joe Biden, so yeah, I guess by that definition I'm a commie. What is your favorite astronomical discovery? Probably that the Earth is round. That's an odd thing to say, but it's such a simple, elegant proof. And the evidence was there. It was discovered 2,500 years ago. And it's something that everyone can figure out if they're willing to put the effort in. Why did everyone get excited about Mars farting? Because methane is an exceptionally good life indicator. There aren't that many natural processes that produce methane. There are a lot of biological ones that do, so yeah, more methane. What planet in our solar system are you excited most about for future exploration? Not a planet, Europa, the moon of Jupiter. We're sending the Europa Clipper mission there. That will lay the groundwork for the real work that comes ahead, but it will finally prove one way or the other whether Europa has an ocean. We need to know that. Are you going to be doing another video on Alpha/Proxima Centauri? As I hear from Anton Petrov YouTube channel that there could be more planets around the star system, and I would love to hear more. Yes, I get most of my news from Anton Petrov too. I imagine there is a sizable portion of the astronomical community that gets most of its news from Anton Petrov. And yes, I am going to be doing another video on Proxima. 2 videos hence. The one after the one I'm doing next. I could swear I've heard your voice somewhere. Do you have another channel? No. Well, I have a personal channel. It includes one video that I uploaded as a test about 3 or 4 years ago, which has 235 views and 3 dislikes and no likes. Can you do a closer to home episode? After 4 billion years without the advantage of a star or tidal heating, why is the Earth's core still hot? Well, I can answer that right now. The answer is radioactive elements decaying in the interior. As to doing a video about Earth, I'm going to do a whole video series about Earth eventually. But that's going to be several series down the line, not just videos. What's the favorite thing you've learned from reading your response to your videos? Does this indicate a dynamic and mutual relationship to you? I've always wanted my channel to be very user-driven. It didn't really work out that way, but I do really appreciate it when I get feedback from my viewers. Most of the feedback I get is corrective, which is fair enough. One of the more fascinating bits of feedback I got was from one of my frequent contributors, David Murphy, who made a comment about how Kepler went against his mystical desires for a more perfect universe. in favor of matching the observations he actually saw. That says a lot about Johannes Kepler and what an amazing scientist he was. And I do intend to do a video on Kepler at some point. He was a fascinating man. His mom was nearly burnt for witchcraft, so definitely a story to tell there. What do you expect from the upcoming Europa Clipper mission? Well, I expect it to do its job. The Clipper isn't really going to be the big revealer. Hopefully, and I say this with fingers crossed, it will reveal what we already think, which is that there's an ocean underneath Europa's ice. It will also determine things like its depth, its salinity, its density, where are the closest points to the surface. We're going to learn a lot, but probably not more than we already suspect. Once the Clipper lays the groundwork, and we actually understand the geography of that ocean, assuming it's there, then the real amazing missions can begin. The landers, and perhaps, maybe even eventually, the divers. I'd like to know your motivation for all the work, research, and effort you put into creating these gems. It's kind of a personal philosophy of mine. Like I said, I suffer from clinical depression. One of the things about having clinical depression is you always question your reason for being on this planet. And I've come to the conclusion that I can be a consumer who threatens the world simply by existing and taking away from the beauty that we have around us, or I can be a producer, I can be a contributor, I can make other people's lives better. And given my relatively limited number of options on how to do that, this seemed like the best way. So when did you first get interested in the vast wilderness of space exploration? I've never been all that interested in space exploration. I could give two wet raspberries whether we build a Mars colony. What interests me more than anything else is why are we here? And studying other planets is a way to learn that. In fact, it's probably the best way to learn that, especially if we find another biosphere. And that's what's been driving me probably since day one. Why are we here? If I found a habitable planet fairly close by to move to, could I bring you along with all my favorite YouTubers? Obviously, a few non-YouTubers would be needed, but they can take their own ship. So what, are we going to be the B arc? Bedding down with the telephone sanitizers and the advertising account executives? No, again, I'm not a pioneer. I will definitely travel to this other planet once the infrastructure is in place for me to do more YouTube videos. I don't think it's going to be there for a while. When are you going to pursue a PhD in the history of science? I wanted to. No one was really knocking down my door to give me funding. Maybe that'll change in the future. It would probably mean I'd have to take a break from doing this, because I have to write a 100,000-word essay, but yeah, sure. If the money's there, I'll do it. I've been wondering, are you just an extremely well-read and competent amateur astronomer, or do you work in the field / have a science background? I'm not an amateur astronomer. I live in London, so astronomy isn't really something that I can do amateur or professionally. I wouldn't necessarily call myself well-read, but I am definitely read. I'm certainly reading up on the areas that I'm currently focused on. Just a thought, but you should combine your video scripts into a book about your favorite astronomers, the French Revolution and the meter, Planet 9, all that, in a book. It would be informative, funny, and engaging. There's millions of us who would love a book like that. I am actually planning on doing that. Not a literal book, but the Planet X series combined with the Water series, combined with a few isolated videos, is already building up into a pretty concise history of our understanding of the solar system. There are a lot of gaps to fill, and one of them will be the 7 classical planets, which will be my next series after the Water series, and then, as I said, a series on Earth. Once all those are done, I will have a fairly complete audiovisual book recounting the discovery of our solar system. Is Connections / James Burke an explicit influence of yours? If not, who are your science communication influences? I get this question a lot, probably by the same person, who said my videos are similar to a series on the BBC called Connections. I'm afraid I've never watched a single episode of Connections. I really should, actually, because they sound really interesting. But no, I'm afraid that wasn't an influence on me at all. The person who has influenced me more than any other is Isaac Asimov. Isaac Asimov was a big hero of mine in high school. I read all of the Foundation and Robot books growing up, and I stumbled across one of his collections of nonfiction, and I suddenly realized that this guy and I had a lot in common because he was able to take bits of historical and scientific information from all across the spectrum and bring them together into these narratives. Like he told a story about medieval medicine and the four humors and then developed that into a scientific study of cholesterol. Or he told a story about Hephaestus being thrown out of Olympus by Zeus and then tied that to the rings of Saturn. I mean, he really was an amazing mind. And I try very hard to be in that liminal space between science and history because that's where I think you learn the most. By combining the two, it makes it seem more human and more relatable, and people get more into it that way. Thank you again, fellow seekers, for submitting all your questions. I hope I managed to sate your curiosity to a certain extent. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comment section. As I said at the start of this video, you are the reason that I do this. I couldn't do it without you, and I wouldn't do it without you. Stay well, and I hope to see you soon at the next milestone.